Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ivan Ivanov from UFO Disclosure Bulgaria, and this is the second part of our UFO marathon for these 2 days. And I am in the house of Mr. Clifford Stone. And now, keep your attention. Where we going with you? This is his office, and we're going in restricted area warning. So when I cross this space, I'm going in the office full with files for UFOs, reporting from files from government, different military projects. His Mundus State Department. You see FBI files over there and thousand documents. They're not anymore classified right now. They're released from the government. And we're going to talk today with Mr. Stone again for you, for people, for all over the world, because we would like to share that we're not alone, and we have friends from other space, from other dimensions, from other worlds, and they're not threat for us. First, we have question from England from our friend Rob Hopkins, and he asking Clifford Stone about his experience and what he saw in his room during this meditation of C5 protocols. Mr. Stone, what do you think about this?
Well, let me get something up here on the internet or on the screen, and I'll try to show you what I do believe about what he was saying.
Okay. And so he said previously, before start that video, that if you have experience close to that experience, then everything you saw is completely different from your perspective in your understanding from this world or another worlds. And Clifford Stone says that the colors is different, and they're undescribed.
You're not capable of describing.
You're not capable to describe it.
The brightness, the brilliance.
The brightness.
You can't put it. You cannot translate it into the English language into words.
Yeah.
It's totally indescribable.
Yeah.
And, the colors that you're seeing have, like, emotions with them. And not negative emotions, but good emotions. And when you go ahead and and if you're doing it right, and you're really having some type of results in that, if you're going through meditation, then what is happening is that a lot of times you do what's called OBE, O-O-B-E, out of the body experience.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, you're actually entering another realm. You're going outside of the dimension. Now you can observe this dimension and that dimension, but you're observing it as a observer outside of the physical dimension that you actually reside in.
And that's why we're not able to describe it.
Well, it's beyond description. We can go ahead and we can put it excuse me. We can put it in terms that we can relate to and understand, but it's not a full description. We feel helpless in that we cannot fully describe what we're seeing or what we had seen, and even the events that happened to us. I mean, you talk to a person that has died and had a near-death experience. They talk about they go through this light, or go through this dark tunnel, and as they get closer and closer to the light and they go into the light, they meet loved ones, things of this sort who have departed. And they talk about when they see this bright light, many describe it as Christ, as the Buddha, as God. There's no name that's given. The light doesn't come out and say, I am God, I am Christ, I'm Buddha, I'm this, I'm that. All it does, essentially what happens in a near-death experience, you're asked, what have you got to show for your life? And immediately, whether you're 10 years old or you're 94 years old, in the twinkling of an eye, everything from birth to that moment that you had that passing, everything that went in that you saw, that you experienced in life, you immediately see in vivid living color. When you're seeing all this, you're feeling the times that you did things that made you feel good. You're seeing the times that you hurt other people. And when you've hurt other people, I'll tell you right now, it's not how you felt. You're feeling what they felt. If you made people feel badly, you're feeling that. And, the whole situation is that for whatever reason, and we've come to realize that when you're sent back, it's for some reason that's not selfish. You have to go back because there's somebody else here that needs you more than they need you over on the other side. And I don't know how that works in because, a mother needs her child. But many times the child dies and the child doesn't come back. A family needs their mom and dad. But sometimes when one or the other or both die, they don't come back. And I have no explanations for all this. I do know that science used to say that they were nothing more than deathbed illusions. Now, we call them deathbed visions. Now, medical personnel are being told, don't shut off a person when they state that they had an experience, because they're trying to find somebody to listen. Because when people are near death in a hospital, we know right now that people who have died come back to visit them. And I always like to think that, and this is me, it's not something that is a proven fact, but I know that there's people in the scientific community that study these that feel the same way I do, that they're there to help them cross over at that moment of death. And everybody thinks it's clear-cut. We live in a three-dimensional world. Well, no, we don't live in a three-dimensional world. We live in a three-dimensional reality that we know. If you can see it, taste it, smell it, it's real. But when you get outside of the realm of this reality, everything takes on an entirely different meaning. In the scientific community, those people who deal with quantum mechanics, I still prefer the words quantum physics, they deal with realities that most of us, the great majority of us, have yet to experience or even begin to understand. And when people start to talk about you're here, then in a fraction of a second, you are, 100,000 light years away. You put that in perspective. If you go from here to Clovis, New Mexico, from Roswell, New Mexico to Clovis, New Mexico, that's a little more than 100 miles. It takes a couple of hours to get there. But using the physics as we understand it within quantum physics, and our visitors can do this also, but, they're traveling. I always like to use the term traversable wormholes, because that's the only way we can explain it, depending on your power source also. There is time involved in that travel, and that's for a purpose, because if you're going too fast and the place is real close, let's say like 100 light years, if you're going too fast, you're going to overshoot your target. So you have to go ahead and adjust your speed, even going through that traversable wormhole. For example, I know for a fact that if they're coming here from a planet that's 100 light years from Earth, real time as it passes here on Earth, is roughly 40 minutes. And, if that's using one power source that they have to use, there's one that's much more potent than that. And if they use that, it'd be like going through, and this isn't even a good example, standing at the door entrance there, coming into this room, going into that room, real quick.
Uh-huh.
But it's even quicker than that. So if you're using this as a propulsion navigation system, you're going to overshoot your target by many thousands of light years. So they have to
This
adjust
is
that
very good example.
So the whole situation is that we now know, even with psychic phenomena, and by the way, your government says they got out of it. That's crazy. They did not get out of it. A lot of the stuff I have right here is documentation that they just recently released in 2016, and we're still dealing with it.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Let's back to the question of our
We're
friend.
trying to get up on the question.
Okay.
And here's the situation. If you ask me a simple question, there's no simple answers. And you have to go into detail to explain them.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to explain here, and I'm going to try to show an illustration here also.
Yeah.
But what happens is that when you're going through this phase of meditation, where you may have an out-of-the-body experience, and all abductions take place in what we call a other reality, another dimension. That's to go ahead and make sure that the person who is involved in that abduction doesn't die, because they could die of sheer shock with some of the things that go on. The reason that hasn't happened is because of the way they do it, and it taking place in another reality, an altered reality.
Yeah. But
when a person goes ahead and meditates, and they have an out-of-body experience, they can go 1,000 miles, see family members there. Family members can't see them, but be very careful, because there's that psychic connection, that bond between family members. They may actually feel you being there, your presence.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be able to see you. Then when I felt you were right here, and you go ahead, yeah, what was that drink you were drinking at such and such time? How did you know about that? Well, the whole situation is that we used to say, and it was one of my favorite TV movies or TV series, have you ever gone into a room and felt that you've been there before, even though you never have? Have you ever had the phone ring and immediately know who's on the other line? Have you ever had a knock at the door and know who was there? If you have, then you have taken that one step beyond. But here we have the situation where we put people in, and this sounds like Superman stuff, but it isn't. It's really scientific. When we were trying to understand how people with psychic abilities, how they're picking up on it, can we cut these off? Is it actually, and we like to refer to it as some type of electromagnetic transmission.
Yeah.
So, we'd put them into a lead cage and see if they were just as good. And we find that people who have these psychic abilities, that does not impede them at all. They can still pick up on. So it's beyond our understanding of the physical law within this three-dimensional reality. And I remind everyone, it wasn't until the 1980s that it was finally acceptable for people, the scientific community, to have interest in the quantum physics and quantum mechanics. Prior to that, it was considered a pseudoscience, pretty much like UFOs or ufology today. It's a pseudoscience. It's not really well founded in the scientific community, and UFOs are not well founded in the scientific community for one reason: we do not have a scientific methodology, a means, an understanding of how to investigate UFOs. And I am very hardcore pressing on this, and that was because somebody asked me to do something, and as soon as I tried to hit up on that, our visitors went ahead, do you know what this can cause? I'm still going to do it, but I'm going to have to explain when I do it why I have concerns about it. Mm-hmm. But the situation is, there's too much friction out there. There's too much static. People, in the interest of making a buck, are coming out with stories that are way out there. I mean, I have to put myself in that category. Some of the stories I tell, you don't have to tell me it's way out there in left field, it's crazy, but it's my experience as I know them. And other people who come out, and I've gotten to the point where I cannot call no one a liar. And I will never call no one a liar. But I will say, if you had an experience, I encourage you to come out and tell your experience. Because ultimately, we're going to be able to put all these experiences that people have actually had together. We're going to formulate a means to understand those experiences and put them to where we can categorize them and try to make some sense out of them. One thing we know about the UFOs, I have to be an expert in one specific field. Another person has to be an expert in another specific field. Because you cannot be an expert in all the various aspects of ufology. It's just like, with science. You break it down in various fields. No one scientist is a expert in all the scientific disciplines that are out there.
Yeah.
We have experts in different scientific disciplines.
Yeah.
Now, with this guy asking about all these colored images he was seeing,
Like arrow?
like arrows and other things, and if I can find
Okay.
just this one thing,
Yeah.
I can go ahead and show you.
Okay. We have viewer from Bulgaria, and he said, thank you for doing this video for us.
Well, just remember, I'm not a scientist, and I'm explaining in layman terms, and sometimes it takes me a long time to get it out.
You're not scientist, but you're a man with a lot of experiences and with that phenomenon.
But it's all important. Okay, I think this one may go ahead. And by the way, this ties in with the gentleman coming out and trying to say he wanted to make people know about certain things. Here we have a good example of a traversable wormhole. Now, you have a event horizon where you enter into it.
Rob, if you're still there, you can ask your additional questions now.
And what happens is with this, I have better pictures, but it takes time to find them all. But when you go into here, you will see multiple colors. You'll have multiple sensations, unless you have that protected field. But and you'll hear strange
Who made
sounds.
that images and where they come from?
Well, this right here is a gentleman by the name of Eric W. Davies.
He's a scientist? Here you go. He's a PhD. FBIS. Aerospace physics, astrophysics. What is DIV? Right here.
Division.
Division, National Institute for Discovery Science.
And this right
Vegas.
here. Oh, yes. This right here is one of the Bigelow's companies.
Okay.
I've never met Bigelow, but I have tremendous respect for him, as I do this gentleman right here. And anybody that thinks that this is just a crackpot, I need to go ahead and point out something else. And remember, he hit up on this. Now, surely the United States government isn't going to spend the good money of the U.S. taxpayer to have anybody from, say, this organization here to do any serious research work for them, right?
Yeah.
And that just would not happen. But however, we come and we find.
One journalist once asked Bigelow, "Do you believe existing of UFO and extraterrestrial life?" And he answered, "Do you think if I'm not believe, I'm not going to invest $1 billion for my personal investigations in the space and in the phenomena in the planet Earth?"
And I agree with him. Now here is a contracted report that was done by the United States Air Force's research laboratories there at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Please note the person who was doing this report for the U.S. government was the same person you saw before.
Yeah.
Here is the address, which is the same on what you saw.
So
Also
he's
before.
not anonymous?
No, he's not anonymous, and he's not a fruitcake, and he's not a nut. What he went ahead and did here, the money of taxpayers, good taxpayer money, went in to pay for this contract to have this prepared. Now he did this, and of course he talks in here. He talks about traversable wormholes. And
is that a picture of him on the top?
Where?
Something I saw. Oh no, it's
no. This right here is just Air Force Research Laboratories. That's just their emblem.
Yeah.
But it makes it clear that what they were doing, and of course this actually ties in with that one gentleman that was saying, don't even worry about it, we'll pick it up shortly. Oh, and if you see my pet tarantula, let me know, will you?
Can I put it here?
Sure. If you see my pet tarantula, let me know, will you?
What?
My pet tarantula, he's about a foot wide now. So if you see him, let me know about it. The spider, tarantula spider. So if you see him, I've been looking for him all day, but
Okay.
but this right here shows what he was trying to do, and we were interested. And remember, NASA was doing the same thing. Then in 2005, NASA, oh, we're closing our advanced propulsion system study because we now understand that it's going to be more than 1,400 years before we even get close to having this type of technology. And I don't want to disillusion anyone out there, short of getting by with a little help from our friends. It's going to be longer than that. Because the whole situation is, some of the technologies that they're talking about there actually traverses, hundreds of thousands of years. And actually, I was told at one point that some of the technology that's involved could be greater than 4 billion years ahead of us. I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of the things that we see flying right now have been flying around since the 50s. The U.S. government actually, how can I put this? They evolved that technology from technology that they acquired that was not of this earth, that we're using right now. The NRO, the National Reconnaissance Organization.
Yeah.
I wish I had a way where I could put PDF files up here, because I have documents showing from the 1950s where we were working on craft that would go ahead and could go at Mach 29 and go at an altitude of over 100,000 feet. They could even take up orbital, and we're talking aircraft, we're not talking spacecraft, even though it sounds like that's what we're talking about.
Right.
They could go and take up orbital locations in space. Now, you go ahead, you do the research, you find out that there are other programs that intertwine. And the whole purpose of what they were setting up, and this gentleman that came out, this Luis, and he was talking about they were trying to get information to have people to report what they're seeing, pilots, military personnel. We did not want to get the rigmarole with the civilian population again, for one thing. There are too many people out there in the civilian sector that will come out and weave stories, and a lot of people say I do it, but at my age and what I'm trying to accomplish right now, I don't really care. I know what I'm saying is the truth. I've been there. I lived it. And I'm doing it for the people who have truly had experiences.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get off on that tangent. What I want to do is go ahead and make it clear. The reason they want the military is because they don't have to bother with the Joe Blow that's setting out and wanting to go ahead and impress people by weaving this real weird story that has no validity, because it clouds the issue. Now, with the situation of them going ahead, hitting up on what they're hitting up on now, they get all the facts. Okay, here this person saw this dish-shaped, or this cigar-shaped, or this delta-shaped craft, and they were able to go at many thousands of miles an hour. They were able to make right-angle turns. They were not breaking the sound barrier. And, going at the speeds they were going, right-angle turns, that should kill the occupants. But yet it wasn't happening. And that the craft was, and it should also totally destroy the craft. But the craft remained perfectly intact. So we get this information, and then we go ahead and digest it. When we digested it, what do we come up with? We found out some of these exotic aircraft that no one even knows they exist. We know, okay, they're saying some of this, but that's okay. All we have to do is be within plausible deniability that nothing like that, we don't have anything like that, nothing like that's flying. But we're not the only country doing this. Other countries have done it too. Primarily, Russia has done a whole lot along that lines. And keep that thought, because I want to come back to Russia.
Okay.
But the whole situation is that we come across others that we have no knowledge of. But we don't want to talk about those. We do not want to go ahead and color the issues. But we also realize something else. From the way you have what's called fade in, fade out. the craft that we are using that none of us have ever seen, they can't do that fade in and fade out because this is using traversable wormholes. And we're gathering bits and pieces of being able to teleport. Now I know I teleported back to the past, and I actually saw where my grandparents went to the outhouse out there. They didn't have indoor plumbing. They went to and I talked to them and asked them, gee, what do you use for toilet paper? And the whole situation is, you cannot go back to the past and have interaction. If that's true, then I got one question. Why are we on the eve of destruction, heading toward a time when we as a species will wind up destroying ourselves unless we do one thing, grow more spiritual with our technology? Because if you don't grow spiritual with your technology, you fall victim to that technology.
Yeah.
And why did we have the Second World War? Why did we have the First World War? Why is it right now the world is not in harmony and is not worried about some idiot going ahead? I think if I start a world war using nuclear weapons and I do a surprise attack with first strike capability, taking out as many strategic targets of my so-called enemy as possible, I will come out as the ruler of the world. And you know what? Whether you want to believe it or not believe it, we're there right now. China has no idea what would happen if they launched those nuclear weapons. We have a fairly good idea, but even we, as sophisticated as America is, has no idea.
Okay, just a moment.
Go ahead.
I want to tell to our watchers that unfortunately right now we cannot translate in Bulgarian because it's impossible. But guys, if you all of you who understand English or speak English, please, if you have any questions, just type it right here and you get that answer. Rob, I don't know if you're still there, but I don't see anything from you. So if you, I got just 3 messages so far. And we're going to talk today for many things, which is completely real. And the first line sounds like, how to say that? Like fantasy, but actually is not a fantasy, it's real. And also, you see our friend today with another T-shirt. And can you show your T-shirt?
And I wish to express my appreciation.
This is image of Christ, and on the bottom he say, I never say that, Jesus. В превод на български, Исус, това е просто една тениска, на която отдолу пише, аз никога не съм казал това. And so you say that you have that T-shirt just to say that sometimes people like to quote Jesus and say, Jesus say that. But actually, in this world, in these days, many people say also, Clifford Stone said that, and you never say that.
Yes. Oh, yes. But actually, it was a fan of mine that sent me this. I'd like to name him by name, but I can't do that because when I got the package...
The face is not... Okay, now the face is visible.
When I got this, the situation is that I got it in the mail, and I don't know whether the return address or whatever had gotten ripped off or something, but I couldn't make out who was it that sent it. And one person I thought had sent it says, no, I didn't send it. But no, I've mentioned quite a few times to quite a few people, I need to get one of these shirts. Because you don't know how many times I've gone to places, and I've even gone to other churches, and where they said, then Christ said, but if you read the Bible, Christ didn't say that at all. And you go around, you see all the different religions, and Christian religions, I need to clarify that, where you have people believing different things as Christians and saying, Christ said, and you go back, look in the Bible, well, no, and then you go and ask, okay, can you show me where Christ said? Well, you're going to have to go and look through the New Testament because That's where he said it. And I don't know how many times certain things on the Sermon on the Mount, people go and say the things he said there. Never said it. But if you really want, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag right now. You know, the Holy Bible is made up of 2 books, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And a lot of people say the Old Testament, New Testament, and the Psalms. Well, I like to go ahead and say the Psalms are part of the Bible within the New Testament, but, you know, to each his own. But you go ahead, the Old Testament, New Testament, you cannot get away from that. Ask people who claim to be Christians, could they please name the first 4 books of the Gospel? Now, the Gospel is actually the New Testament. First 4 books, when I first started to put on this experiment, so to speak, people would go ahead and give 1 or 2 books of the Bible, going with the Old Testament, because the Old Testament's there. Well, let's see, there's Genesis, and there's, no. Well, you're saying that the first book of the Bible is not Genesis? No, I'm not saying that at all. I agree with you. But what are the first 4 books of the Gospel? I think it was 84% of the people was asked that question from an experiment that was being conducted by the Stanford Research Institute. 84% could not answer it correctly. The first 4 books of the Gospel, very simply put, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And now I got a confession. Please don't ask me what the 5th book is, because I honestly do not know. But because this was part of a scientific experiment, I do know that. And yeah, I read the Bible daily.
Look, I'm sorry, I hit something.
Oh, that's okay.
Behind me.
Oh, well, does it have any feet? In case it's my pet. You don't see them? You can't, I mean, it's over 12 inches, Diana.
If you want, go back a little bit so I'm not staying
Are
in
you
this
serious?
corner.
But one thing I want to show you right here. Do you remember the guy came out and said, talking about getting information on these craft, these unconventional aircraft, and it ran from 2002 to 2007, and they said it was a useless thing to do, and they stopped it. Well, actually, that program goes way, 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 way back to the 50s, when they went ahead with the CIA had conducted a program called Unconventional Aircraft. Now, they also had what they called advanced threat technique assessments, or advanced technology assessments. In short, they were looking for anything dealing with advanced techniques, advanced technological assessments. And the reason they were looking for this kind of stuff was for one thing. There were 9 things that would come into play that could be very threatening to us in any future war, that all dealt with technological advances that we, if other countries had them, we needed to find out about them and be able to take countermeasures. One of those, I think it was number 3, was the interaction with a technologically advanced alien civilization. And it wasn't put out there like it could happen, it's put out there that it's going to happen. In 1962, they were talking about going ahead, getting a group of people together, putting them on an aircraft, which we still had to go ahead and consider on how we were going to develop the propulsion system of that craft, sending it out into the cosmos within our galaxy, not the solar system, but outside of the solar system, not the universe, but just within the Milky Way galaxy. Send them to an inhabitable planet, and when they get to that inhabitable planet, they would go ahead and contact them. They would learn as much as they could from that planet, the inhabitants of that planet. But of course, this would be the next generation, because the one that flew the craft out there, most of them are going to be up in years and near death, if not already died. The next generation would go ahead and learn as much as they could about that planet. They would have children, the third generation. The third generation would go ahead and get as much information as they could until they were in their early 20s or something like that. Then they would head back to Earth. They would bring that information back with them, but on the way, that third generation is going to have a fourth generation of children, and they're going to teach them about the planet that they left, that they were aware of. So they could come back here and tell us people who were here on Earth about what happened. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh my God, Stoney's lost it. Nothing like that ever happened. Let me show you something. And see, this is what makes it hard. I know. I need a secretary. Anyone out there wanting to volunteer?
Yeah, any volunteers for secretary of Mr. Stone? Има ли доброволци за секретари на Mr. Stone?
Here's the report that I'm talking about from 1962. And that's the name of it.
Yeah.
In short, they're saying telephoning ET is just not going to work and it isn't practical. But this is practical, and you know what? I hate to say it. Now we're in the 21st century, and I agree with these people here. That would be pretty practical. And of course, a lot of people with scientific thought in the entertainment center have thought about this also, because there's been movies brought up about it. When Worlds Collide, here it was. They went ahead. They had a group of people that they had to send out here and find a planet someplace out there that was very suitable for living. They don't make it clear whether there's, intelligent life there, but they could live there. And they had no choice because the Earth came to an end. But the one thing I want to point out once again, bouncing back and forth here, people are saying, no, this is a bunch of baloney. The Defense Department is coming out and saying the 2 videos that have come out showing what was supposed to be fighter pilots trying to intercept UFO. I think there was a Navy pilots that tried to intercept a UFO. Then there was another one where they have them and said these were released by Department of Defense. The Department of Defense are denying that they released any videos like that, and they have no idea where they came from. I like the videos. I think they actually show some things that people who, if these are hoaxes, people knew what they were doing. But here again, they're coming out and saying no. And of course, it was initially said that this advanced
technology,
advanced aircraft threat review was a bunch of baloney. It never existed. And like I'm saying before, it did exist. There was an upbeat, what we call a sub-project from a project that covered that period.
You can drink a coffee.
Oh, I will.
Just feel,
And I firmly believe this to be the case.
Okay.
Now, what I also said, all the way from the 1950s onward, we had that program. It was the CIA, their Office of Scientific Investigation, in their Advanced Research and Development Program. They were doing what was called Advanced Aircraft Assessment. They were doing that for for several reasons. One was to go ahead and ensure that if there was any advanced technologies that came out in uses of foreign aircraft, we would know about it. They were doing it for another reason, to get these advanced aircraft that we now know did not originate on the face of this planet. And it was the OSI that was initially tied with doing the vast majority of the UFO investigation, while pointing the blame at Project Blue Book. And they wanted that in 1952, and it almost got to the point where the National Security Council had released what was called a National Security Council Intelligence Directive, which would have gotten the entire intelligence community involved. The CIA had to block that. They did it with what we call the Robinson Panel. the Robinson panel met, and they actually concluded what we need to do is go ahead and ridicule people who are reporting UFOs, and the UFO problem will go away. Well, guess what? UFOs don't go away, so people are still going to be seeing things. People are still going to be talking.
Yes.
When they ended Blue Book, you can't go ahead and say, here it is, it's raining. Well, okay, the rain no longer exists. There's sunshine out there. You walk outside, put on a raincoat, or you're going to get wet because the rain's still coming down. And, you know, when we get to the point where we understand, and I understand one of the biggest problems, which is, I'm going back to it again, is that there was too much static out there. Even with Blue Book, when they had Sign, too much static. Grudge, too much static. Blue Book, same thing. Because you had people who were making wild stories. And if you go through the Blue Book files, you find that be very careful. Because there were reports where they went ahead and called them hoaxes when they were not hoaxes at all. And later they found out other people saw the same thing that other people were reporting. But, you know, as long as they had them marked as hoax, they were good to go. But don't always think that it's U.S. government that's doing this. The government will go ahead and outsource to private enterprise companies that they can go ahead and swear them to secrecy, where they're not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, and they can keep stuff very hush-hush because they don't have to tell the media, Congress, the president, anyone, anything that they don't want to tell them. Good example, everyone knows that with us going through the remote viewing, we had outsourced to private enterprises this type of material, and the programs, they were subcontracted to them, and we came back eventually saying, oh, they're not working, they're not worthy to be kept going, so we're putting an end to the program. We still do research in remote viewing. Now, with that being said, let me point out, Russia still does research in remote viewing. I'm sorry, Great Britain, but you guys do it too. France, to a lesser degree, does it. All the highly developed nations are doing it. Now, don't let me go ahead and forget the less developed nations. But see, we can go ahead and cover up some of the things they're doing by saying this is silly native superstition, or superstition from these countries because they're backwards. They're in the modern world, but they're still backwards. Well, you know what? People go ahead and hear what some of the Native Americans have to say. And they say, oh, that's just legend, that's just legend. No. I've talked to a lot of Native Americans. And some of the things those people have experienced, some of the things those people say, you know what, plays right into the modern day. Only thing is, a lot of the people, a lot of the Native Americans, as well as some other countries, were friendly with our visitors when they first started coming here. And they actually had open contact. It wasn't like it is now where everything has to take place in the darkness.
Believe or not, 20 years ago, I met a Russian scientist. His root is Bulgarian. I mean, he's Bulgarian, but
The one I know?
No, you don't know him. I mean, maybe, but I don't believe. His name is Todor Dichev. So, 20 years ago, when I talked with him, he mentioned about these programs of KGB or any other Russian government resources. He talked about this remote viewing. I mean, 20 years ago, and that time he talked also about this generators for psychotronic generators. So manipulating the opinion of the people. And his theories was very strange in that time and very scary if you believe it. But now, 20 years later, we hear about this stuff. So nothing is new. Just
It goes back. If I have a dog and I call him Blackie, and I go ahead, he runs away, he gets lost, or I give him to someone else, and they call him Blue. Well, it's not a different dog. It's the same dog. It's just got a different name. Now, with these programs, the whole situation is that we tell the world that they wasn't working out, so we stopped them. And all that happened is that the classified code names of these projects got compromised and became public knowledge. We don't do away with them. We go ahead and we just change the code names.
Yeah.
And just like we hear about this advanced aircraft threat assessment, well, this is one thing, but it also deals with the techniques of remote viewing.
Uh-huh.
But right here, this is a secret. There's some are top secret. This right here is the final report, October 1978. Unclassified name was Advanced Threat Technique Assessments. And you're not going to find this except in the files of the CIA, because they're the ones that contracted it out. But
what still not is done with that disclosure? I mean,
it's a self-keeping secret.
You have a lot of documents released from CIA, FBI, Air Force, from everywhere. Dr. Stephen Greer created the C5 protocols for conscious connection with the other dimensions and beings. People start make these conferences and congress about UFO, and there's a lot of people going and talking about this. Probably some of them they're very solid. They're scientists talking about, with facts, with science about this stuff. But some of them, they're just talking foolishness just to make a movie and money and to be famous. What you think need to be done? What is still not done? My personal opinion is probably that contact with extraterrestrials is going to happen individually, maybe according the conscious of the people, not like a global contact, like that movie we know from Hollywood.
I'm going to bring that movie up because yes, that movie's important.
How was that? From Third Kind?
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Third
Now
Kind.
that right there, everybody needs to go back and watch that.
Yeah.
Because you had all these people who saw the UFOs,
Right.
who felt that they were having some type of contact, but not all of them were.
Uh-huh.
But to be sure, there were many that did have contact, and they felt this urge, it was even worth putting their lives online to go where there was going to be a mass pickup of these people. Well, the U.S. government, when it was able to go ahead and decide where that location was going to be, so they staged that there was a accident involving toxic chemicals, so they had to clear the entire area for miles around. But you had these people who actually were chosen by the visitors to come there to be picked up.
Or maybe there's not any chemicals.
Oh, there were no chemicals. That right there was what we call a cover story.
Because the bird, if you remember, the bird they holding, these two guys was alive.
No, when they got them, they were alive. When they took them away, you saw where they had that, and it killed the birds. Also, they were going to have a mate, but we wouldn't be that sloppy. But for the movie, they wanted to make the U.S. They wanted to make it look like government wasn't really, wanting to cause people financial harm. So the situation is that they had this BZ gas that would go ahead and knock a person out immediately. Well, they went ahead, they used the BZ gas on all the animals and everything, so the livestock and everything that was in there looked like they had died. But, it was only necessary to keep the livestock down long enough to get the people out of here. But here, and it was, of course, they say Jacques Vallée is who this really would be, and I could see how that could be, because he was a French scientist that was very, very much involved with the UFO activities and the I guess late 50s. I know in the 60s because I was a great fan of his and follower. But he went ahead and says, why is it all these people are willing to risk their lives to come here? What if it is they're being invited here? And of course, the deadhead colonel that was in charge of the operation there says, we didn't invite them. He said, I wasn't talking about us. I'm talking about the, I think he used the term visitors. It's been so long since I saw the movie. But, it has a place in reality. And, Spielberg has an interest in UFOs. Spielberg doesn't believe that UFOs are hostile. He's 100% right on that. But at the same time, and, people go, I had an hostile experience, and darn you, Stone, for ever saying that they are not hostile. Well, you know what? I go ahead and I see things that happen, and one of the biggest things I hate is the protocol of the prejudice within our societies. You have a black person or you have an Hispanic person commit a crime. Then immediately, see, blacks are evil. They commit crimes. Hispanic people are evil. They commit crimes. You know what? A white person does it. Oh, that's just a crime. The whole situation is that crimes are committed by people, irregardless of race, religion, or ethnicity.
Yeah, crime is crime. Doesn't matter what is your color or your religion.
So, the whole situation is that we have discriminations even involved with our visitors. And one of the major discriminations that is involved, how does that come into play? Well, we believe that some of our visitors, can't be smarter than we are. We are the smartest things in the universe. So with that being the case, it makes it very easy for people who want to change paradigms, the way we think, our thoughts. It becomes very easy for them. And,
how to change the paradigms?
Well, yeah, in short, we're the only thing in the universe. We are the most superior intellectual creatures in the universe. If there is life out there, they cannot be more superior, more intelligent than we are.
More intelligent and more evil.
Well, the whole situation is, and people disagree with that, and here again it goes back to paradigms. But, I need to touch on the paradigms here. The paradigms is the social group that you find yourself involved with, what they accept as being good and what they accept as being evil. Open society looks upon murder as being evil. The open society, general society, looks upon any type of taking human life as something evil. Now, if I'm in a gang culture, and I'm loyal to that gang, even though I'm among the general population, my paradigm is tied to the thoughts of that group I belong to, that gangster group. So they have a different definition of what is good and what is evil. Somebody goes ahead and transgresses against the gang, that causes things that are maybe detrimental, like the members of them being arrested for crimes that they've committed, and I go out and I kill the people who went ahead and advised law enforcement of these situations that got them arrested. I'm looked upon as a hero because I did something that was very worthwhile and in the eyes of the members of the gang, good. Now, we call these rogue elements within our general societies. Our visitors come from civilizations that have good and evil.
So they know, they can recognize evil.
Now I'm going to get there very shortly on what I'm trying to say about the good and evil. But they have good, but then they have the rogue elements. The rogue elements are the ones that are doing the abductions and all that. But even within the rogue elements, I have one significant case I can point this out. they will go ahead and they will have people in those groups that are good-hearted and sympathize with the people they're abducting, but yet you have the leadership that sees, I got a mission to do. Good example, when Barney and Betty Hill were abducted in 1961, they wouldn't know what happened until 65. But Barney, he was frightened. Here again, good example why it takes place in an altered reality. Both of those people would have died. They were so scared. But, he was so scared he just wanted to get out of it. Betty, she was scared to death too. She wanted to get out of it. But she was also concerned that because there was one there that was sympathetic towards her, saying it's going to be okay. We're going to release you here momentarily. We just need to find out some things. And she says, well, people aren't going to believe this ever happened. I need proof that this happened. There was a strange book there on a table where she was on this, like, gurney, for lack of a better term, that they had her strapped down at. And she says, I want that book. I want to take that book with me so I can prove this really happened. And the one that was sympathetic to her said, it's okay. When you get ready to leave, you can take that book with you. Well, the entity that appeared to be in charge turned to him and very how can I put this? In a negative manner, told him, no, they can't take anything. No one must know that this ever happened. When they leave here, they can have no memory of what happened.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, and it shows our visitors have the same problem, we do not and we will never fully understand the psychic of the mind, no matter how advanced your intelligence is. And I think the whole purpose of that, God in His infinite wisdom put a block there. Because if we start to understand that fully, you know what we're going to discover? We're going to discover the soul. And we aren't, nor is any other intelligent life out there meant to, we are not to have the ability to access the soul.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
These visitors, did they have a soul?
Sure they do. Every living thing has a soul.
Yeah, but when right now I remember something. When Corona was with you, Corona is male or female, actually?
He's male.
Okay. When he said, what is this water in your eyes? So he don't know that this is tears. Maybe he don't understand what the emotions have.
He doesn't understand the emotional impact of killing that little bird had on me.
And also, my understanding is that Corona don't understand what means tears.
There are, well, not in that purpose. Not at that time. Now, even the one that I helped escape wasn't crying, but at the same time, he was very concerned, and I could even feel the emotions that he was having, that I could feel the emotions as being human.
Uh-huh.
Because, we go ahead and we make them cartoon characters. This little creature had friends back home. He had family, meaning he had a wife, he had children, and he wanted to be a part of his family's life. He didn't want to die early, but he knew, which is something I didn't know, that they would ultimately kill him just to find out how he may be different internally than we are.
Yeah.
To do what we call a dissection, not an autopsy. Autopsy, you know what you're looking for, and bisection, you're getting bits and pieces. Just, oh, okay, that's the heart. Okay, now I see. Okay, what are these? Oh, that's the lungs. Okay, they're different than us. And he felt that ultimately, this is the fate that would be waiting him. But the whole situation is, his people were coming to get him. They were not going to try to kill anyone, but what they were going to do was rescue, and for lack of a better term, all I can say is their friend. The friend that was being held by us. And in doing that inside where we were at, I don't want to talk about this too often much because I'll start getting mine. I don't want to do that.
It's about that case you help the extraterrestrial to escape.
And the whole purpose of getting him out there was to go ahead and keep our people from being killed. And
Because the proportion?
Because the way they would, for example, when they go ahead, if that field up on their craft is not up yet, and we have fighters trying to intercept that craft, there is a energy released when they put that field up. It totally destroys the aircraft that's within, say, 3,000-4,000 feet of the craft, and because
this is huge, 3,000 feet.
Oh yeah. Well,
and can you imagine inside how big is it?
No. I'm talking about the like when an aircraft breaks the sound barrier. Okay.
Okay.
You have that boom on the ground. It has nothing to do with the size of the aircraft.
Oh, okay.
It's just that it exceeded the speed of sound. So, as it exceeded the speed of sound, the air goes around it and collapses and back, and that's where you get that boom. And because the two air waves collide real quick in the back, and you get that boom. So it's a continuous boom. Because from second to second to second, it's hitting the ground where people can hear it. But the whole situation is that they have that force field. It's less than 1/4 of an inch that surrounds the entire craft. And if they don't have it up, and you hit one of the craft with an air-to-air missile, it will bring that craft down.
Yeah.
But if they have that shield up, and that's the only way I can describe it in terms of we understand, then it would go ahead and keep it. Even if you hit it with an atomic device, it would not damage the craft. But when they turn that on, anything within several thousand feet of the craft itself, even if the craft is only 35 foot in diameter, anything outside, when they put that field up, anything within several thousand feet of that, when they turn it on, the energy field that's released from turning that force field on and around the craft would be totally destroyed, because our craft are too, flimsy to survive that force field hitting it. That energy flux, I guess is the way I can put it, because it's not actually part of the force field. It's just that it releases that. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a camera, okay? And I go ahead and I decide I want to take a picture, and I take a picture, but I hit the flash.
Yes.
Well, the bright light you see has nothing to do with the camera itself. It's the light energy that's being released from the camera. But the same thing. It has nothing to do with the size of the camera or anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But
go ahead.
We've had aircraft that have been destroyed that way. And people say, okay, they destroyed our aircraft. They did this, and we see that as a hostile act. Well, we don't understand the technology. So, yeah, we see it as a hostile act because it went ahead, it destroyed the aircraft, and it killed people. Now, Russia knows this better than even we do. Why? Because Russia has lost more aircraft than we have. I think it was March 1967, the Cubans lost a fighter. The U.S. government says, oh, that never happened. Well, eventually, it was named in one of the lawsuits that the U.S. government didn't want to talk about, and they had the in-camera court affidavit that was put out, and Stanton Friedman talks about it all the time. Well, eventually, years later, some of that was released, and they started to make mention of that particular incident. And what do they say? Oh, well, when we consider that document that he's talking about, the incident, total hoax. But now that we have seen some things, we understand what that was all about. Essentially, they were alluding to they scrambled, and there's a document, by the way, which I don't know why they released it. They were too stupid to realize that the dates would coincide. But they went ahead and they have a document that shows where they scrambled fighters after UFO. But now the NSA does not go ahead and let you know where the physical location that happened. All we know is it was in the area of Cuba. And here again, it was two MiG-15s that was scrambled. But it doesn't say anything about whether any of them were destroyed or not.
Mm-hmm.
But the official byline, the official cover story, is that one craft was destroyed, was destroyed because of mechanical malfunction.
Okay, question. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you, but you mentioned many times Russia today, and before you mentioned that Vladimir Azaja, a Russian scientist, spent a week with you in your home years ago. If it's not a secret, what do you talk about together?
What's that?
If it's not a secret or something very privacy, what you talk about together? You and
we talked about
Azaja.
UFOs. A lot
Of
of
course,
things
a UFO.
a lot of things we're talking about right now.
What he
But he
wanna
was
know?
very open.
What kind of questions he asked you? What
Actually, we were just essentially exchanging notes. The only problem I have, like, he gave me the book, and that book, of course, had was written in Russian, so it was hard for me to understand. But some of the stuff I got translated. But the whole situation is we were talking about things that I know of that we were doing here. He's talking about things that he knew of that was going back there, up to and including the crashes. And he hit up on, there were certain things that I didn't know about that he was saying, oh, no, this is what, and I have to accept him at his word that, I think he probably was working on an official capacity with UFOs in the former Soviet states. Bottom line. I have to think that. And of course, this was just after everything became open, because it was, 92, 93, when we in the former Soviet states became kissing cousins.
Yes.
With the wall being tore down.
Right. Oh, that happened after 1989?
Oh yeah.
Your meeting?
Oh yeah, because up till 1989 I was in Germany. And we were hitting up on stuff going on in going on right there in Russia. And what we were hitting up on was what was going on in Russia. It was still considered the former Soviet states, or it was still considered the USSR. It would be, I think, 1990, 1991, that they decided, bring the wall down, which they did, and thus it became where they became separated powers. But at the same time, you had the mindset, and God forgive me, I think that Putin is one of those people that believes and feels within his own heart that the former Soviet states should have never separated, and within his own mind they aren't separate. All of those former countries that were puppets of the Russian government, I sincerely feel within my heart that he feels that they are still part of the Soviet Union.
Of course.
And the whole situation is that here again, he's a victim of his paradigm. He's a victim of what he believes is his concept of good and his concept of evil. And the bad thing is that truly, and we cannot begin to comprehend this because we go ahead and say, well, what we believe is good, our visitors may not believe is good. What we believe is evil, our visitors may not believe is evil. Well, there's universal good and there's universal evil, meaning wherever you go, in this universe or even in the multiverses, that good is good, that evil is evil. But we go ahead and we, and that's actually a self-survival mechanism. We have to believe that certain things are good and certain things are bad within the culture that we find ourselves in. Now, I love animals, but I have no problem at all eating a good juicy hamburger or cheeseburger, okay? Now, what am I saying? Some poor little cow had to give its life for me to have that hamburger. And, right off the bat, to me, killing is wrong. But in my mind's eye, I can go ahead and say, okay, it's food for us. So killing that cow so I can have that hamburger or cheeseburger, I can accept that as I can lighten it up as a necessary evil because God provided these animals for us to have food. Well, did he really? Or did he provide them for us to have emotions and be able to interact with other species? A cat, a dog, a parakeet. Here in America, people think, you mean there are other civilizations that eat dogs? And, my dog's close to me. I mean, the two that I had that passed away when we first got him, he was a little pup.
Yeah.
I grieved over them. We buried both of them. And I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do if something happens. This one thinks, person, not just like a member of the family, but thinks he's a person.
Okay, I'm turning camera in that way because I'm very tired to stay in the corner.
Oh, I bet you could stand there for 20 minutes or more, and don't forget that chair's behind you.
What do you think to take a break for now? And,
Wait a minute. The mail got here 15 minutes ago. I need to go get the mail.
Okay. And maybe tomorrow.
Now, to go ahead and show I didn't use any real psychic material there because the mail really is out there. Show the window. I saw the mail truck go by.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stone, for your time to be with us in UFO Disclosure Bulgaria, and for all people from the world who is watching that video. And we're going to check the questions. If you have any questions, of course, please leave it here and you'll get your answers. For now, goodbye.